Welcome to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Today we are going over my top 8 BRO standard Gravidia deck profile. So I made top 8 in the America region with this beautiful deck. This is honestly the most fun I've ever had in Overdress as far as a deck goes. It's just incredible. We'll get into all of those details, but first I need to do a bunch of shoutouts. So the number one shoutout first goes to Kai from WCC because he's actually the reason I even know about this deck in the first place. At first, all of us were just gonna play Bruce or Loro. You know, those were the known good decks. Pretty straightforward, good turn 4 decks essentially. And I think we were split like 75% was gonna do Bruce and 25% was gonna do Loro. I think Toby was on Barrow though, but beyond that, you know, all the same stuff. And then one day Kai goes, hey, actually there's this really interesting deck. It's called Gravidia, but you play worlds in it. So it's like Meteor World or Gravidia World. And so I started playing with it. I started testing it and it was really good and really fun as well. So I instantly pivoted and then obviously I started making a lot of changes to the list because I did feel like there were certain things that could be optimized for me. But overall, he is the reason that I know about the deck. So shout out. Of course, also shout out to the other people in WCC. We tested quite a bit. Like normally I don't really test for standard or V much, but here I actually did. So I tested a lot with Steven. I tested a little bit with Derek. I tested a lot with Toby, a little bit with Simon, a little bit with Kai, I want to say, a little bit with Noman as well. I don't think I tested with Kelvin. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, but yeah, all of WCC, of course, we're all always hanging out in voice chat in the tournaments, trying to cheer each other up when things go bad and cheer each other on when things go well. So that's really exciting. Then next shout out is for 50 cards. He's actually the reason I got to play this deck fully blinked out. Not fully actually. I'm missing a few cards, but it's very close to blinked out, and so that's also very exciting. So thank you so much for that. If you need any Vanguard cards, you can go to the link in the description, 50cards.shop, and use the code Solemn for a discount. I think he has set 4 stuff up, which also has Gravidia support. I think Clan Collection as well, just a bunch of stuff. Then also shout out to the peeps at Hermelan in Aalst, which is the locals I usually attend, and then specifically Nikki and Bram, who I also tested a bit with. So without further ado, let's actually get into the profile. So the first thing you see here is that it's not your typical deck. Most decks in standard is just you have your ride line, it's always the same thing. All the cards fit together, you know, they were designed for each other, and everything else, you know, starts meshing around with that. Here, this is not the case. We are actually playing the Orfist start of the ride line, but then we end on Gravidia. And so what this does is you have the rush from Orfist, because this gets you the knight, and then that gives you a token. And then when you make that token, this guy gives 5k. So you have a really solid rush turn. But then after doing that rush, instead of riding into Orfist, you ride into Gravidia. So not only do you now start getting your cards back, because on your rush turn, you also started calling cards from hand. You really want to push them hard. Now she draws those cards back. So you're never really punished for committing so hard. And then, because you rushed hard, your opponent already had to guard a lot or is at high damage. If they now start committing cards, which they have to do if they want to win, Gravidia also punishes them for that by wiping their board. So for some reason, there is a really solid synergy in here. Now beyond that, there's another really neat thing. Basically, whenever you place this, obviously you have your Persona ride. If you were to Persona ride, that's 1 draw. Then the 2 meteors, that's 2 draw. So every single time you rewrite, it's 3 draw. But she also deck tints 2 cards, those 2 meteors. So this deck tints 1, first ride deck tints 2. The first Persona ride, you have already deck tint 5 cards. That is the same as a Grand Blue Obadiah turn. Now obviously you could say, oh, but it's split up, so the ratios are kind of different. That's true, absolutely. But the overall idea is there. You actually hit triggers very reliably in this deck because of all that meteor tinning. But so in essence, it's kind of an aggro deck that then just happens to be able to grind as well. And again, I've had so much fun with this. I don't think I've ever topped with an aggro deck. Maybe Bastion is somewhat aggro, but yeah, this is the one aggro deck I actually enjoy. This is a really fun deck. So now let's get into the rest of the list. Now the first thing that's super obvious, we have 3 more Gravidia. Obviously, Persona riding is broken. Like, you need to Persona ride, so you never want to run less than your 4. If I had to sum up the Overdress format, it's going first, Persona riding, triggers in general, and the over trigger. Those things together have so much impact on your game, it's actually insane. Now, of course, you still need to play properly. You're not gonna set consistent results when you're playing like shit. But you can lose really easily when these things don't go your way. So Persona riding is so crucial. The swing in tempo from not Persona riding is so detrimental. You need to max these out. Now, this is of course all the same from the initial list. So this is still the same as Kai's list or the Japanese article. There was some stuff about that as well. Now we get into things that I changed. So we're running 1 Twisting Bulldoze. I really don't like this card. when I first played the deck, the initial list had 2 of this, and I felt that card just sucked. And I instantly cut it to 0, was like, fuck this, I don't want to pay CB, I don't want to soul charge and get closer to deck out because this already has a deck out issue. I don't want to have this thing without shield when I already have all these meteors that don't have shield. It's just very clunky, I don't know. It's also a piece that I can't call down on turn 2, and you'll notice from the rest of the list, I want to call everything down on turn 2. So anything that's not callable on turn 2, I don't want it. So I cut this card, and then after a while, as the list became more refined, I did notice like, hey, maybe sometimes that slight power ceiling increase, that slight opportunity to high roll is still worth it. So I put in 1, and then I started tracking every single time I wished this was another card. So I had a few card names that I was like, okay, every single time I have a bulldoze in my hand, do I wish it's a bulldoze or do I wish it's something else? And so I did end up being happy with the 1 bulldoze. But with that being said, I'm still not a huge fan of the card. And next set, it's out. Piece of shit, but it did help me. It was solid. Next, what's different from my list as well is I play 2 Eclipsed Moonlight. So most people playing Gravidia World only play the 1. And so then you just search it off the grade 1, you get your token, and that's the extent of your world place. And that's fine. You know, the deck does its job. You get your rush, and then you get your Gravidia place, it's all fine. However, what I really hate is when I mulligan, and I mulligan very aggressively in this deck, drawing the Eclipsed Moonlight, and then not getting to plus of the grade 1. That's just awful feeling. And again, I'm mulling super aggressively. Meteors, gone. PGs, gone. Triggers, gone. This grade 3, gone. The only thing I'm keeping is stuff I can call down on turn 2 and persona rights. That's the only stuff I care about. And so I will constantly send back 4 or 5. That means that I will pretty often draw this one as well. And so I ran the second. Now, there's another reason, because if you think about it, if you do draw your other copy, that means you now actually have a stronger game for a long time. If they don't have a retire, this is a 15k booster on both sides that you can play an entire game with. That is a huge game changer. It's kind of like a bulldoze in terms of offensive value, but that lasts for the whole game for the 1 CB rather than having to pay every single time. It's not the same number, but when you start counting out, like, it's pretty similar. Beyond that, I also started running cards that give you payoff for some of this. And so for that reason, the 2 definitely made sense for me. Now, next set, it's very possible that we go down in this because we start getting really good other Gravidia cards. But for now, I was very, very happy playing the 2. So now, one location where I really made some major changes is the grade 2 lineup. I'm playing 3 Scissors Bar, which is something no one ran, 3 Stanner, and 1 Barringer. So the initial list actually had 3 Destajade, 2 Stanner, and that's it. So Destajade is the Orphist card that says if you have a Dark Knight, he goes to 2k extra, and if you're in Abyssal Dark Knight, he gets 5k extra. Now, the initial list doesn't run the 2, so you could actually only get the +2. That was all you need, because on turn 2 you would call the Destajade, boosted by an 8k, and that would be 20. 20 would make a magic number on the grade 2s, and kind of on the grade 1s, and that way they would hit over a trigger. Then your other lane would be the Shadow Army token. If that has something in front of it, you know, that's hitting over a trigger as well. Then your Cubisia, the grade 2, gives himself 5k, so he's already hitting over a 15k no pass. And so just like that, your numbers were really good on a Destajade turn. However, Destajade beyond turn 2 sucked ass in my opinion, because once you ride 3, not only do you lose this Dark Knight stuff because your Gravidia places meteors, and so then it's no longer the only order, 10 also doesn't hit magic on 13. So if you're going second, the Destajade, whether it's 10 or 12, doesn't do anything to your opponent. You then need those boosters to hit any numbers, and even your 10 boosted by 8 is 18 doesn't hit over a defensive trigger. And thus Destajade, while really solid on turn 2, really fell off after that. Now, its big power is that the 2k is continuous forever, so also on your opponent's turn, meaning when you commit to Destajade's early game, your opponent can't rush you back on those rears. Like, they're not really gonna want to attack the Destajades to deny you damage when they're not even sure that they would hit. The thing is, I felt that that by itself wasn't good enough to justify the slot. Now, my teammates Derek and Kelvin both also topped with Gravidia World, and they were running the Destigate, so it's definitely not wrong or anything like that. It's not bad, but I preferred this by far. So this card is a promo that says when he attacks and you have a set order, which is virtually always, Soul Blast 1 and it gets 5k. So it's a 15k attacker. And the thing is, this is a 15k attacker from turn 2, essentially. So the moment that Destigate is good, he's also good. But then on turn 3, where Destigate starts getting worse, 10 plus 8 is 18, doesn't hit over defensive. 15 plus 8, 23, does hit over a defensive. So that is much, much better. He scales much better into the late game. Beyond that, if you're going first, 15 plus 8, 23 actually hits magic on their 8k as well, so they can't even 15k guard it anymore. So if they don't hit a defensive, you're just rolling them out of the game. So for that reason, Scissors Bar is incredible early game. Now, later on into the game, we get into our Stanner. Stanner is literally better than Scissors Bar in every single way. It gets the 5k, doesn't cost a soul, and gets 5k shield as well. So once you're at that meteor amount, which is usually turn 3 or 4, it's not always turn 3, but Stanner is much better. But again, on turn 2, this card kind of sucks. Again, 10 plus 8, doesn't hit anymore if they hit a defensive, so kind of worse. So the goal is to be able to see a Scissors Bar early, and then if you have a Stanner, sure, you can already commit it down in front of the Shadow Army token, you're still hitting magic numbers, but at least on that other side, you do want to see the bar. Now you might want to say, hey, but why wouldn't you play 4 Scissors Bar if you want to see it early so badly? The thing is, you never want to use 2 Scissors Bar because then you will run out of soul by turn 3. Now you might say no because Gravidia soul charges, but the thing is you don't want to soul charge. You really don't want to soul charge. This deck has a deck out issue. It absolutely does. You're thinning, you're drawing, it's just deck out Palooza. So you almost never want to use that soul charge, meaning if you are Scissors Barring on 2 sides, that's not going to go very well. So for that reason, we're running the 3-3. Ideally, I want to see 1 Scissors Bar, 1 Stanner, and I'm going to have a great game. So again, they're fulfilling the same role, but one of them shines more on turn 2 and the other one shines more later on. Finally, we have the 1 Barringer. This is kind of like the high roll card. So what this does is when it's placed and you have a meteor, which is always, you Soul Blast 3, high number, draw a card, gains 5k, and then it also has that continuous skill of gaining 5k power like Stanner, but doesn't get the shield. When you draw this and you haven't scissored yet, you can literally just place it, you will have the soul, you will draw your 1 card, and you're very happy that you run this. If you have already used Scissor early on, you can choose to use Gravidia Soul Charge to still use this card. So you gotta be aware, like, is this matchup gonna make me deck out or not? But sometimes it is like a cool little high roll. With that being said, I don't want to run a bunch more because I could never resolve multiples. And it's a strictly worse Stanner if you're not using the first skill. Now, if I weren't running Scissors, I could probably run more of this, but again, I want to have that full-on aggro package, so the Scissors had to be in here. Now, beyond that, if you don't get to use the skill, again, it's just a shitty Stanner. It's still gonna be a 15k at the exact same point the Stanner is. So once again, all of these cards are slightly better in different situations. They're still the same card. They're all 15k beaters. It's really simple if you boil it down to its purest elements, let's say. And it's the slight ceiling increases in like different points in the game where you're happy that there's still different cards. I played around with this grade 2 lineup so much, it's actually insane. I started with the 3 Dusty, 2 Stanner, then I was like, I kind of want to have the Scissors bar in here, and I was playing like Scissors, Dusty, and Stanner, and then I started adding a Stanner, and I cut a Dusty and added a Scissors, and then it kept on evolving until we got this. I'm very happy with this lineup personally. So next up for grade 1s, this is going to be a bit obvious, of course. We have our 4 perfect guards. At one point I did consider cutting some of these because I was like, well, if I'm just gonna be an aggro deck, I can't call this down because it's a 6k, so it doesn't hit magic with any of the numbers we just spoke about. But obviously that was super greedy and I need the PGs. This is the same as you know, the list itself. Then we had 2 Bobal Mine, once again, really solid card. You are eating quite a bit of CB, you know, every single turn you use 1 CB for Gravidia. If you use your Dark Knight, that's another CB. If you use this, that's CB every turn. This card is also important because if you Dark Knight it and then your opponent tries to deny you, so you can't Gravidia, if you then have this up your sleeve, or you already committed, whatever, they notice, damn, I can't deny them at all. The Bobal Mine kind of just makes it so that even if you only have 1 CB, you can still play the game. This was already part of the list, really solid card. At one point, I considered running 3. I tried it out as well, not for too long because I did notice I don't need to CC that often either. Now then, we have the most argued over slot in this entire deck. So Kai was running Wells, the JP article was running Wells, everyone was running Wells, and I said, fuck it, I don't think Wells is good. And so I put in at one point the cat. There's this cat, Cardinal something something. Basically, if you're in Dark Knight, you can pop it to have a 5k shield, let's say, for an attack on your Vanguard. If you're an Abyssal Dark Knight, it's a 10k shield at that point. So my thinking there was I can commit it down early on, bash their skull in, you know, it's gonna be a great time anyway. I'm a pure aggro deck, so I plop my hand down, I start bashing, and then later on, I can still nuke it to get that shield back. So that was the thinking, and it was pretty solid. I was happy with it, especially because I was into the double Moonlight play very early on. And so obviously the potential of having a 10k shield was really, really attractive to me. Beyond that, there's a little play you can do if it's behind your Vanguard and your opponent is swinging with the Leonard at you, knowing that, okay, you're gonna guard your Vanguard, but you're not gonna guard your booster. So then they're gonna hit and gonna get to do all their plays. You can actually kill the cat before Leonard gets to hit it. And you don't even need to be in the Dark Knight. Like, if you still have meteors, you can kill the cat and just not get any of the power, but then at least the Leonard doesn't hit. So that was a little trick there, and so I really liked the cat. However, the impact wasn't quite there. Like, it was decent, but I ended up settling on something much, much cooler in my opinion, and that's 2 Tamborino. So this was a pretty last minute addition to the deck, and so essentially what this does is it boosts the Shadow Army token, adds 15k, and then blows up the column and draws a card. This is, again, a little bit of that high roll thing, where, like, you know, the rest of the deck already is super solid. It's a bunch of 15ks that bash, and the whole Gravidia right line and so forth makes it so you can bash early, and you don't get punished that hard for it. So this is just, you know, the deck is already consistent. On turn 2, it's just a booster in the left side, and I will never use its skill unless I draw into my second Moonlight, which does happen. But then later on, if I'm playing the game against a deck that doesn't retire the Shadow Army token, and that's plenty of them, I draw this, I'm like, oh cool. My turn went from alright to insane just like that. You suddenly have a 38k column. On a Persona Ride, it's 48. If you see any triggers, it's even more. That then vanishes and you draw a card. So you get to push really hard, commit, and then draw. That's really good. Especially if the other side is this Bulldoze. So you have your Bulldoze, let's say you're on Persona Ride. Bulldoze by itself is already 33. If it's boosted, it's 41. Then you have here a 38, but with Persona Ride 48. This just makes your whole turn so much more scary. It's really cool. So again, a little bit of that high roll potential in an otherwise very, very consistent deck is always cool. And again, I can afford it because I'm running the double Eclipse. So even if one token goes away, I can still, you know, get another token that way. If I committed this to the left side early and let's say use this, you know, early game on the right side, if I then draw the other one, I can still resolve it and place it in front of that. So this is really a thing you can only do when you're running the double Moonlight, but I really liked it. Now, in some matchups, the fact that this can retire your token and get value out of it is actually also pretty good. Like, if you're going up against Prison, Prison is going to imprison your token and you get nothing out of it anymore. So you might as well get some extra push and then, you know, draw a card for it. Similar story against Barrow Magnus, for example. Like, on their turn 3 if they high roll, or turn 4 if they don't high roll, your token is going to vanish. So you might as well bash their skull in with the Tamborino and then draw a card, because otherwise it's going to be gone anyway. Beyond that, if you don't have a Persona Ride in your hand, this gives you one more chance to draw into it. There's actually not that many cards in Overdress that just draw you a card out of nowhere. So overall, super happy with this pick. I would not change this whatsoever. And so the reason we actually argued so much over this slot was the initial list had Gravidia Wells, and so what she does is you can place meteors from your hand for a Soul Blast, and then she gains 2k. So the good thing about that is that it can perform as a grade 2 10k and as an 8k booster no matter what you want. Or it can be a 10k booster on your Vanguard or for the Bulldoze. That's pretty solid. Sometimes placing the meteors comes up, but that's very, very rare. Usually you don't want to go minus like that, but it's mostly the 2k, and that's decent. But I felt like, am I really in this super consistent deck gonna play something that's so consistent when it doesn't have that like insane ceiling bullshit that I was looking for? Tamborino was the ceiling bullshit. Oh my god, I love this card. So yeah, I would argue with Kai like, dude, tell me again, why is Wells good? Like, explain it to me. Come on, explain. Why? I don't get it. I disagree, man. So we were constantly constantly arguing over wells and a little bit over bulldoze. But overall, you know, that's just how we are. That's fine. I like to go with a little bit more out there card choices sometimes, and that tends to work for me. And they maybe go for the more consistent path, and that works well for them. So, you know, we're all happy. Overall, very happy with the Tumbarino pick. I would not play the cat over this. Next, we have bricks. We have a rock and 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 a rock. Total is 9 rocks. So the initial list had 10. And again, if it's not a piece I can call down on turn 2, I don't want it. So I reduced the rock, and it didn't really matter that much. I didn't notice the 1 rock difference. Sure, would there maybe be 1 in 10 games where I miss 1 rock that could have been? Sure, that happens, but I thought 9 was still pretty fine. Overall, again, it's a brick. Like, in your hand, it doesn't do anything. It has no shield. You can't even call it down to Guardian Circle if they have some Battle Door skill. It's just sitting there. Usually when I draw this early, I just get rid of it in order to ride up, because again, everything else is a piece I can call. Next, we get into the trigger lineup, and this is actually pretty interesting still. So first we play 8 critical. The astute, observant card fighter among you might notice, hey, isn't there an effect crit? Why are you playing vanilla crits when you could play an effect crit? And the reason is an effect crit isn't 5k. So in testing, for me, the effect crit never came up. It was like, oh, am I really gonna minus 15k shield from my hand to then give 2k to something? None of the stuff I play hits magic numbers plus 2k. The only thing maybe is if I have a bulldoze boosted by an 8k and the crit on the other side, and the crit goes into soul, gives 2k to the bulldoze or the 8k booster. Sure, that hits magic. That's the only time that hits magic. I don't know. That wasn't worth it to me compared to having one more guy on my board that I can bash with, because this is a stupid aggro deck and I needed that. Specifically, usually, because, you know, early on I was really into even calling triggers down, then I got less greedy with the deck. It's finding that balance between overextending and properly extending, let's say, but where I will call this down very often is behind Vanguard. If I'm going second and I have to swing with an 8k grade 1 and they're gonna go like 15k no pass, that tempo decrease, oh, that hurts. So I would much rather have a 5k I can call behind Vanguard. It's gonna hurt my opponent. And then next turn, on my grade 2 turn, that means my Cubicia grade 2 is already boosted by a 5k. So now I don't need to give the 5k power buff to the grade 2. I can instead give it to the Shadow Army token, which is 20 then, meaning it hits over a defensive trigger. Or I can give it to the bar, which is then 20, so it also hits over a defensive trigger. If I have double Stanner, let's say, I would have Stanner boosted by Shadow Army, already hits over defensive, and then Stanner boosted by an 8k. I don't have the 5 set orders yet, so that's only 18. Give the 5k there, that's 23. That does hit over a defensive trigger again. So you're always basically trying to optimize your numbers so that you can hit over defensives and that you hit magic numbers to make it as awkward as possible to guard. So yeah, for that reason, I didn't want the effect crits. I just wanted that booster because it's game changing sometimes. The only time you would probably want the going to soul crit, and we did spoke about that in the team quite a bit as well, is against the prison matchup. Just being able to, you know, place it in the prison and then grab it back out and it goes to soul again. So now it, you know, works as something to call out of the prison again and, you know, have a little bit of that loopity-loop going. That's pretty cool. That has value, but overall I really preferred this because it's more useful in more matchups. Next, I have 3 front triggers. Sadly, one was hollow. My heart, my soul. I did have another SP coming, but we couldn't get it in time, so one hollow. Very sad. Initial list had draws, but Kai and everyone else quickly, changed from that. The draws, are you gonna draw into meteors? Like, good luck. You really want that extra shield in a deck that already runs so much non-shield. Beyond that, the Loro matchup. What shield do you have? You only have your 15Ks? That 20 really matters in that Loro matchup. When they swing with the Sentinel Restrict, you just want to go, oh, 20. Easy game, easy life. You don't want to go, oh, I have a draw, which is 5, and a meteor, which is nothing. That feels awful. So for Loro matchup specifically, very happy to have fronts. And again, this already has a deck out issue, so you don't want to randomly draw. And this is an aggro deck, so you do want to push harder. So the fronts definitely made sense in the deck. Next, we have one over trigger. This thing. This thing is extra insane in this deck. Now, some people were talking about how Gravidia does the 5 meteor thing and then doubles it up. This deck virtually never does that because you don't play that many meteors. You're not playing the grade 1 wells in your ride line, so you don't get all those free meteors either. You're just not running enough stuff and enough meteors to justifiably use the 5. Does it come up? Sure, maybe once in 40 games you'll get to do that, but usually you don't, and so getting to double this up almost never happens. What is pretty insane though is because this deck thins so much, again, every single ride is 2, Your grade 1 line is 1. Every persona ride, again, 2, 2, 2, 2. You thin so much, you actually see every trigger just more often. And that includes this guy. Also, because we have a deck out problem, that does mean our deck velocity is very high. So we do go through the deck really quickly. This means either we draw it or we see it. It's gonna go off at some point in the game. This is again why it's only a one-off is a total meme. If your deck velocity is high enough, you're gonna see it. This won me round 2 or 3 defensively against a solid Barrow player. I literally just checked it at 6, you know, OT bullshit at 6. I did end up losing one of my rounds because my opponent OT'd out of lethal. So, you know, you win a game with it, you lose a game with it. It's still horseshit. It still needs to go. And then I also actually won my top 16 game because I checked it offensively because, you know, 100 million, 200 million with extra crit, GG, right? This is probably the highest impact one, I want to say. Like, when you flip this offensively, very often the game just ends. Most of them do kind of have that impact, but this one is just extra. It's just way too extra. Even if they got rid of the 100 million power, this one would still probably often win games just being flipped with all the crits and double power. It's incredibly insane. Next we have the 4 heals. This beautiful heal. Wow. At one point, again, I wanted to go way over the top. I said, Kai, this deck is an aggro deck. I don't want to heal. They never go off anyway. My opponent is always at higher damage. I'm gonna cut my heals for more fronts. That was not a good idea. I'm glad I didn't listen to myself and just played more heals because, you know, once you started testing more games, you know, it's like, okay, this deck doesn't always win on turn 3 and 4. Sometimes you do get into grindy situations and then you do want to be able to heal. So 4 heal, definitely correct. Don't cut these. So that was the deck. Overall, super happy with how it performed. Obviously, could it have gone better? Sure, you know, I would have liked to have 1 overall, but topping consistently is more important to me overall than having 1 win or something like that. It's much harder to do well event after event after event than, you know, getting lucky once. But again, I will keep trying to keep doing better. This deck is the most fun I've had in Overdress so far. Zorga just sucks too much ass. I hope he gets good support sometime soon. Maybe set 6 or the festival collection or something like that. For now, this is just way too much fun. Hope you found it interesting. Again, shout out to everyone. WCC 50 cards. Use the code Solemn. If you need anything Overdress, like, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.